You're listening to Inside the Village, where all news is local and no topic is off limits.
So help me, Bob, it's bully in the alley. Hey, bully in the alley. So help me,
Welcome to Inside the Village for the week of April 12th, 2023 with Michael Friscolanti, Editor-in-Chief at Village Media. I'm Scott Sexsmith. Now, we're actually taping April the 11th, and it's opening day at Rogers Centre.
Yes. Exciting stuff. Your Blue Jays against my Tigers.
It is exciting.
Yep.
I should have brought my Jays jersey down because I did wear it.
Yeah. Battle of two teams that I don't think are going to the playoffs.
Well, if you ask Matt Betts.
I know. I'm sure everybody listened last week to Matt Betts, a great reporter at Cambridge Today and host of the Canadian Baseball Network podcast.
Yeah.
Now, of course, he spoke before the Rays ended up going 10-0 to start the season, right? I think they were 4-0 at the time he came on the show.
Yeah.
I wonder if he changed his tune now.
That is crazy, 10-0.
Yeah, that's wild. I mean,
I don't know what they're drinking there, but man.
I know people are already doing the math. Like, if I go 500 the rest of the season, what are my odds of winning the AL East? But man, they look solid. That's got to be the best managed team in sports. They just keep pumping out. It's like they have a cloning system in the minor leagues.
Yeah.
With these pitchers coming up, it's wild.
And you and I were talking just yesterday. You know, the advantage of getting off to such a wonderful start like that is it gives you a cushion because you know you're going to have that 2, 3, 4 game slide at some point. Mm-hmm. But when you start at 10-0,
that's crazy.
Jumping.
Pretty amazing.
All right, big show today. I want to start with, of all things, skinny dipping in Lake Simcoe.
Yeah, it's our tradition to talk about the great local journalism we do around the chain, and some of it's more serious than others. But I guess a new report came out that said that Lake Simcoe is the top spot for skinny dipping. So obviously our markets near Lake Simcoe, Aurelia, for example, jumped on that story. Not quite exactly sure why, but definitely worth the read. I know you were saying you knew why because you're skinny dipping there all the time, apparently. Yeah.
Yeah, you do not want to. I'm not. You know what? I'm not even going to go there. Let's just move on.
Let's not go there.
Psychiatric experiments.
Yeah, another great story to Simcoe. Barrie Today, Marge Bruneman, who covers some great stories there. A lot of crime-related stories, a lot of court-related stories. There's a lawsuit going on there that has exposed a bunch of weird experiments that were done on psychiatric patients at the former Oak Ridge, which is Penedanguishine's maximum security psychiatric facility. So these experiments are back in the 60s all the way to the mid-80s. And the lawsuit is claiming damage or some of the stuff they've done. And it's a real window into what went on there, right? Oftentimes it's a lawsuit where you're forced to pull out some documents and give discovery. And so she's told a pretty crazy story about what was going on there. It's definitely worth a read.
And lastly, a new story that just came out a couple of days ago. Apparently, Niagara Falls is going to be the place to be for the solar eclipse.
So actually, Niagara, the whole region is the place
whole
to
region.
Be. This is what, so next year's solar eclipse is in April
right.
2024, and our team in Pelham at Pelham today was covering the town council, and someone gave a presentation there explaining why this is going to be why Niagara, for all these various geographic reasons,
right.
are going to be the hot spot to watch the solar eclipse. So they're expecting tourists from all over the world to come to Niagara because it's the best spot to watch this eclipse. So now all these different communities are figuring out how to attract tourists and how to get ready for this big event that no one was really thinking about until then. So it's pretty fascinating stuff.
All right, look forward to that. Okay, on the show today, a very serious topic. Angela Thayer is our guest, and her mom, Suzana, has had a whirlwind of a life. You talk about being scammed on the internet. Suzana has a story or two to tell for sure.
Yeah, this is a wild story. She was the victim of a romance scam, ended up giving, they think more than $200,000 to someone she met online who she never actually met in person. She went on to write a book to warn others about not falling victim to these kind of scams. And then sure enough, she's scammed again, in this case, lured to Ethiopia, put on a plane with someone else's luggage to Hong Kong, and now she's being detained by Chinese authorities because they found drugs in this suitcase. It's a crazy, twisted story. Nikki Cole at Barrie Today told it very well a couple weeks ago on our site, and now Angela's going to join us and get into the details of what happened to her mom and what's going to happen next.
All right, it's crazy stuff, and we will hear Angela and Suzana's story next when Inside the Village returns right after this.
Reporters, editors, and journalists who go the extra mile to get the story and get it right. Go behind the scenes with those who cover the stories that matter most to you and your community. Look for it in the Village Features section of your favorite Village Media website across Ontario.
Welcome back to Inside the Village alongside Michael Friscolanti, editor-in-chief here at Village Media. I'm Scott Sexsmith. Pleased to be joined on Inside the Village today by Angela Thayer. Angela, there's so much to unpack here. I think I'd just simply like to start by asking how you're holding up and maybe when the last time was that you spoke with your mom.
I feel I'm, just trying to be strong and get through day by day. I think things like this is, keeping me busy trying to advocate and that trying to find evidence to support my mom, which I have found some evidence, to support she was in a romance scam. So basically just, I guess, holding my head up and just plugging along. I think when this is all over and she comes home, that's probably when I'm going to crash.
Mm-hmm. I can imagine. Scott and I talked a bit about the case before you came on the show, so our listeners have an idea of what's happening. But can you kind of walk us through it? Obviously, as we know, your mom's sitting in a jail right now in Hong Kong. How did we get here? Can you kind of start from the beginning?
It all started basically, like my mom was with my father since the age of 13. They got married when I was 10 months old, and they were together their whole lives. My father passed away December 21st of 2016. He was a police officer, a really, really good man. My mom was basically devastated. Sorry.
That's okay. Take your time.
Yeah, take your time.
She was devastated when he passed away. She was really lonely and missing him and grieving him. It was about the year of 2021, or maybe into 2020. I'm not entirely sure when this really all started, but I would say safely enough, like around 2021 sometime. She started talking to guys online. And when she was, talking to these guys online, she ended up developing this one relationship with the individual's name that he goes by was Dr. Williams Walter. And, she was, wanting to marry him, and basically she made comments like, this is, could be your daddy. And when she was, kind of going through this whole process, she acted like a teenager, head caught in the clouds, just kind of infatuated in feeling loved again. And that's something over the course of time I discovered through the information that I found, that she was just really trying to find the love that she's lost. And when so it was summer of 21, my brother had noticed some things. And so he basically contacted my sister and I, and we kind of, tried to kind of pair together to, try to talk to her. And my brother and his wife discovered some information that was in our apartment, because she was living with them at the time. And so a lot of it was, references like, get William Walter money, various things, kind of like a to-do list for him. And then the bottom half of the pages were like, kind of like affirmations for herself. And so with all the information that was, kind of presented, I ended up, calling the OPP to come and see her. And it took me 3 days for them to actually come out. But I'm glad they did, because when the OPP were there, that's when she admitted that she ended up giving this man a lot of money, and I'm not exactly sure of the exact dollar amount, but it's at least over a couple $100,000.
Someone she'd never met, right, Angela?
No.
And were you suspicious, Angela, from the get-go?
No, actually, I wasn't. She was happy. She obviously was, trying to find, a relationship for her, which I wanted her to be happy. Mm-hmm. He did taught her I wouldn't say taught, but convinced her to like go on a diet, eat certain foods. Mm-hmm. Which is something she wanted. She wanted to lose a little bit of weight. So it was a positive thing. He convinced her to go off her sleeping medication, which I looked into. It wouldn't hurt her. It would actually probably be okay for her to do so. And it wasn't, the worst that it could do is just give her a lack of sleep. And then he taught her how to meditate, which I was a big fan of because I, do that myself because of my back problems that I have. So these were all like positive things, and they were like slowly integrating, from one to the next. So it wasn't like all at once. It was like slow over a course of a little bit of period of time. Mm-hmm. And so those were some of the things that he was doing. And I discovered the day that I drove her to the police station to make this report. He ended up, convincing her to go off social media, and he was starting making her afraid to trust her family and her friends that are there, trying to make her believe that they were just trying, we were just trying to ruin her relationship with him. Mm-hmm. So that's how it started. So when we found out, that relationship ended up coming to an end. I don't think right away, because I seen some messages when I was like looking on her old cell phone that I had. There was some messages that she still had contact for a short, like maybe a week or two. Like it wasn't very long. But in around that same time, this second individual named James Kaywood came into the picture.
Can I just backtrack for a second, Angela? I can't imagine the shock you and your siblings were in when you realized that she'd been giving this person money.
Yeah, it was. It was something that you would never really expect to see or believe in, and when somebody's in this head in the cloud state, it's really hard to get through to them. Mm-hmm. She was just acting like a teenager, so it made it like more difficult to try to get her to see that. And I think that's why I wanted the police there.
Mm-hmm. And I'm right. Your mom then decided she wanted to write a book to warn other people against falling victim to this kind of crime.
Yes.
Yeah. So and she was working on it, or had she finished it?
She finished it.
Mm-hmm. And why did she want to do that? Why was that important to her to have that book out there?
She wanted to spread the word to prevent anybody else from falling trap to being, victimized and fall prey.
And what ended up happening is she did fall prey again, right?
Yeah, she did.
Can you tell us what happened?
So with guy number 2, con number 2, he was pretty much kind of like a wine and dine without really meeting. He didn't ask for anything. Developed like a really nice friendship online, and from the evidence that I have found, she, this second person ended up being from the U.S. Army, and so she was doing what you call, I guess, like sending emails back and forth to get like approval for him to go on an emergency leave so they could get married. And when this happened, he was apparently on his way, and he was, he was not allowed to come to Ontario because he was being shot at. By, and so the U.S. Army basically said they feared for his safety, and they requested him to basically said that he's not allowed to come to Ontario, and that they captured the shooter. And when they interrogated him, they said it was Dr. Williams Walter who sent him to kill James Cawood.
Angela, let's fast forward. I know that you mentioned that James wasn't after anything specifically. In fact, he was wanting to give and give your mom. I think it was a trip that ended up having her end up in Ethiopia. Maybe we could pick up the story there and where we are today and how we got there.
So part of that story that I was just saying, because he wasn't coming to Ontario to see my mom wanted to go and see him. And so she ended up got a emergency passport completed and sent out. And when that had happened, that's like he ended up paying all expense trip to Ethiopia. I didn't realize it was Ethiopia she was going to, because she said she was going to Utopia, but I don't really think she even knew where she was going.
Right.
So when she got to Ethiopia, I was on the phone with her every day, texting her every day. They're 7 hours ahead, so we kept in touch. She also spoke with her best friend Sue, who talked to her far more than I did. Sue also gets up early, so she had more of an opportunity to talk than I did because I'm not an early riser. So while she was there, I asked my mom to send me her e-visa, send me her passport, send me her flight tickets, send me everything. Because I was more worried about her being kidnapped, somebody stealing her, identification, more lines of, being robbed and mugged and kidnapped or killed or something, being this, white woman in Africa.
Yeah.
She was 64 at the time too.
Angela, so, I just want to ask: at any point when James Cawood came into the story, and all of a sudden he's offering to fly your mom over to Ethiopia, did you have one of those aha moments and kind of say to yourself, "Wait a minute, this kind of seems all too familiar"? Did any bells and whistles or alarms go off to you? Not
till afterwards, because I didn't know the story and what led her to Ethiopia until way after she was in prison. Because that's when we went on her devices and found emails with that information.
So she's in Ethiopia and this gentleman doesn't show up, right?
Right.
So what happened after that?
When I asked to see all her information, I ended up looking at her e-visa, and I knew her flight home was September 9th. And when I looked at the e-visa, it said the expiry was September 2nd. Her flight home was September 9th. So I looked up the laws in Ethiopia with if you have an expired e-visa, and it said if you're caught, you could be jailed or fined. And I was more worried about my mother being in this foreign country and being arrested and thrown in jail for, an expired e-visa, because those kind of countries would, do those sort of things that I felt I believed. So I started really getting on my mom's case. It took like 3 or 4 days to kind of go through the emotions of how can we get her home? How can we change the e-visa? Like, I ended up looking at, getting her an earlier flight home, which ended up being over $3,000. And neither of us really wanted to pay that, because it was a lot of money for just a flight home.
Of course.
And so I think it was like 3 or 4 days into asking her every day, okay, well then just go down to, either the airport, the embassy, one of these places, to just extend it a week, that, because she had to go in person to do that. And of course, James Cawood wasn't there. There's nobody, she couldn't speak the language. She had no idea where to even go. She was afraid to leave the hotel that she was staying at. So she said she ended up talking to James Kaywood, who basically ended up fixing it to flying her to Hong Kong. And the reason that I got for this change was he couldn't make it to Ethiopia because he got stuck at the location that he was at, and he needed someone to relieve him, and so that he would meet with her in Hong Kong. And during the time that she was in Ethiopia, she was had this one male visitor named Eric, and there was a driver, which my mom ended up taking 10 videos the day before she left on the way to the COVID testing center, because at the time, they had to be COVID tested to before you flew to a country. So we got a glimpse of this Eric guy who sat in the front seat. The same individual who showed up to her hotel room the day of she left brought a suitcase with some clothing, and I was on the phone with my mom around the time that happened, and I was more concerned about the suitcase, and she assured me that it was fine, so I just kind of left it and didn't think anything of it. And then she was telling me about the clothes. She said she never really looked at them. She just kind of seen a couple pieces, I think, from in the suitcase. And she's like, I can't wait to bring these clothes home so that you can pick out what you want, And she's like, oh my God, are they really loud? So all I thought was, cool, clothes. I didn't think anything could be wrong with clothing. Mm-hmm. So I didn't fight that one, and now I kind of wish I did, and I kind of wish I just said, leave it,
And as we now know, your mother flew to Hong Kong with this suitcase, and when she got there, they discovered drugs in the clothing. Is that accurate?
In the buttons, I think it was.
In the
Yes.
buttons? Yeah.
Yeah, 1 kilo.
1 kilo
cocaine.
of cocaine.
Wow.
And did you find out right away, or was there a lag in a few days before you heard from your mom, or how did you find out that it happened?
During that period of time, it was September 5th, I believe. My mom was supposed to land early hours of our morning here in Ontario, and I slept in. It was about 10 o'clock. So before she left, I ended up getting her to put her phone on tracking, so that way I could track her phone. I was just adding another air of security for her, so that way I just could kind of see where she was and just have one little more piece of info just in case anything went wrong, right? And I was just trying to look out for my mother in her best interest to keep her safe the best I could. So I ended up, didn't hear from her. I kept checking my phone. It kept showing that she was at the airport. So, and I called the airport several times that day in a few different departments, asking if my mother's landed, where is she? And every response that I got was, nope, she's not here, she's left. So then I kind of started worrying, okay, well, if the phone is saying that she's at the airport, where is she?
And how did you eventually find out where she was?
It was later that night, because I had to wait for the hotel to open. So during our day, they're through the night. So it was also hard to get really any answers through the day. During that process, I also called, a couple times to the embassy. The first time I called, I was, called in concern of the situation, but I didn't really have anything to go by. I didn't leave any information. And I was told, well, don't worry about it. Just give it some time and call us back when there's anything to report. Mm-hmm. So, and then when I was actually, I think it was about 6 o'clock in the evening for us here in Ontario. that's when I like called the embassy again, and I left a message by phone and by email saying my mother's missing. I can't find her. And after I did that, I ended up calling back to the hotel, and we spoke to somebody and found out that through the hotel that someone from the airport had called them to say she couldn't come and wasn't going to make it because she's being detained.
So that's how you heard, yeah.
Well, that was the start, and I didn't really knew what that meant. I thought it may have been paperwork or something, or I really didn't know. And then someone from the embassy had contacted me 10 o'clock that night to tell me that they spoke with my mother. They got permission from my mother to speak with me, and she was being detained at the airport. They really didn't give me too much more information than that. They said that tomorrow, on September 6th, someone from the Ottawa embassy will call and reach out to me. On September 6th at 10 a.m., that's when my mom had called me. I was at work, and she said that she's been arrested for having, they found cocaine in a button. That's all she thought. Like, she had no idea it was multiple buttons that had cocaine, or she didn't even know how many buttons were in this in the clothing. Did
she realize at that moment, Angela, that she'd been scammed again by someone online, that's just in a different way?
I don't think so. Not right away. She didn't understand how it happened. She didn't think that this James guy would do this, to her. She was, asking if this James Kaywood guy could, get her out of this, and not only just get her out of it, but she also wanted someone to contact James Kaywood to get him to confess that he did this to her. So I think maybe, yes, she did have maybe an idea she might have been, but at the same time, I don't think it really kind of like set in right away. Within time, I'm sure, by sitting there and thinking it all through, it finally did.
Did he vanish, or did you ever have any contact with him after that? Did you try to reach out to him?
I was advised by the embassy to not do it, and unfortunately my sister-in-law Sue did reach out to him, and he did respond saying that Suzana is his responsibility, he'll do what he can to get her out, and then never heard a word from him again.
Angela, before we let you go, can you just let us know where things stand now? What is the government doing? What's the latest?
All the government can do is just really keep me updated on my mom's situation, for her, for physical health. Pass me letters, let me know when I need to send money. Really, just to keep me updated. They have been really good and supportive in that way. And then they obviously, do the same with my mom. We send letters through the embassy to my mother, and really try to just keep all parties up to date and informed. And I am acting as their POA. Made, reports with the police. Really, I ended up going through all of her, the information that I had, available to me before it was, the devices we had here, we sent to Hong Kong. And that's how I got a lot of this information. And I just kind of gathered everything that I had, that I was able to get, which can, prove her innocence. And she is applying for legal aid. But it's a long time coming for that, so I don't know what's going on with it.
And how long has she been locked up now, Angela? And what are experts telling you about how bad this could be? How long a sentence could be if she is found guilty of this?
It's been about 7 months. Right now, just 7 months and if a week or something like that. If she is found guilty, it's basically a life sentence of 20 years. But she's innocent. I know she is by the evidence that I have found. Yeah, and I'm just basically working to get her home.
Mm-hmm. And that's obviously why you keep keeping her case in the spotlight and talking to people like us. You want to make sure people know that this case is still going on.
Yes, and this is something that my mom has really requested. She's like wanting her story to get out there to help others to get into her same fate. She really wants awareness to be brought forward. I know by the letters that I've gotten from her, she's completely afraid and doesn't want anything to do with the internet when she comes back. I really believe that her being in prison has really opened her eyes and woke her up.
Wow, what a story. Angela, we wish you and your mom all the best, and we're certainly going to be following this story, and we will do whatever we can to keep the word out there. Thanks for taking the time today.
Thank you.
For the latest in in-depth features and enterprise journalism from your local writers at Village Media, be sure to check out The Big Read. The Big Read. It's the full story behind the headlines. Look for The Big Read on your favorite Village Media website across Ontario.
Back to wrap on Inside the Village with Michael Friscoletti. I'm Scott Sexsmith. I'm blown away by Angela and her mother's story. It's mind-blowing to think that stuff can happen.
I just can't get past the fact that this lady wrote a book to warn other people about not falling victim to a romance scam, and then sadly falls victim to another online scam, different kind of romance scam, but pretty much the same. It's just heartbreaking, right? And we often will hear stories like this and think, how could that happen? How could you not see this coming? But it happens, and people, they get duped, and they think that this is going to be the one that's not a scam, and it is. And if you think this is an isolated incident, you're wrong. It happens all the time. All the time.
Sadly, most of the stories probably don't come to the forefront. Mm-hmm. But when you think, losing $205,000 wasn't bad enough, now Suzana Thayer is faced with losing the ultimate in her freedom.
For sure.
Crazy.
We hope there's a happy ending to this one, but it's going to be a while, I think.
Yeah, a long road to hoe, as they say. All right, we are back next week, and it's a big show.
Next week is?
First anniversary of Inside the Village.
That's right. Oh, we got something special planned?
Well, we have
streamers,
trick
balloons.
Or two. Look, low budget. We can't afford streamers or balloons. But Derek will be here. You'll be here. I'll be here. And who knows, we may even have a very special guest as we mark 1 year of Inside the Village. InsideTheVillage.ca, you can find a year's worth of episodes, of course, wherever you get your favorite podcast and across the Village Media Network. For Derek Turner, executive producer here at Inside the Village, Michael Friscoletti, editor-in-chief, I'm Scott Sexsmith. We'll talk to you next Wednesday.
You've been listening to Inside the Village.
Frisco and Scott's Wardrobe, provided in part by Moores, Sault Ste. Marie.